Thank you for being here. It's a great turnout. I appreciate you all taking the time to be here. I am Doug Neidick. I'm with Greenworks Development, and I wanted to get together today to talk about the new solar array that we just put on the roof of the building. We put a solar array on the roof of the building in 2008 after we built the building. I'll show you the details of that in a second. That solar array was expensive. That solar array didn't really completely make financial sense. We put a solar array on the roof of the building that we finished 2 weeks ago. It absolutely makes financial sense. And the goal of today is to tell you about the fact that solar makes financial sense in Pennsylvania right now. I don't want to talk that much about the environment. I don't want to talk that much about climate change, although there are absolutely conversations to be had there. Actually, next Wednesday, Penn Future is going to do a climate action event at the Dixon Center. It's at 6:30, I believe. I've got flyers for that event out on the refreshment stand if you're interested in that. Today, I want to talk about the financials around solar. And what I talk about when I'm talking to any potential solar customer is the financials. I really don't like to talk about the environment because people have different thoughts about that. All I want people to know is that solar makes financial sense, and it absolutely makes financial sense in Pennsylvania right now. That's the goal of today. Let's look at the slide deck. This is the first thing I'd like everybody to know about solar, and this is all part of the energy wall that's out in the lobby. First thing I want everybody to know about solar is that every hour, the amount of energy that hits the planet is about the same as the planet uses in a year, which is nuts. Every hour, the amount of energy that hits the planet is the same as every building that's heated, every car that's on the road, every oversized truck that's on the road, every cell phone call, anything that uses energy, all of that hits the planet every hour. That's unbelievable. So we are basically squandering the future because we haven't decided to use that energy. And that energy makes financial sense with the right financial incentives, and that's what I want to talk to you about. Question is, how does solar work? Solar is pretty straightforward. So we've got a solar panel that we put in the lobby. I'll have some guys out there that can talk you through that after we're done here. A solar panel in the upper corner of the screen right there is a solid state device. There's a semiconductor material in that panel that's the same as the semiconductor material that every one of you has in your pocket. That semiconductor material in this case turns photons of sunlight into electrons. And it collects those positive and negative charges, those electron hole pairs, to an upper and a lower electrode. That creates a work loop. That work loop is what drives energy. So you basically, through a solid state mechanism, have sunlight hit a panel. That sunlight energizes the atoms in the semiconductor material of the panel. You throw negative charges in one direction, positive charges in another direction, you collect them, and you're done. When you take those panels and you put them on a roof, like the roof that I'm looking at in the graphic and the roof that's on the building here, you put those panels on the roof. Those panels are solid state. There's no moving parts in those guys, so they've got 30-year warranties on each of those panels. If anything goes wrong over a 30-year period, those panels are replaced free of charge because there's nothing that can go wrong. Those panels then run down the side of the building right there into an inverter, and an inverter is a device that turns DC electricity that the panels produce into AC electricity that you can use in the building. That inverter is going to go bad after about 20 years. There's a 20-year warranty on those guys. That's the only piece of the system that's got any kind of a lifetime to it that's meaningful. After you go through the inverter, you go through a bidirectional meter that runs back and forth at the same cost that you're buying electricity from. You can sell electricity to the grid when you're overproducing at any given point. That's called net metering, and that's part of what makes Pennsylvania solar work. Greenworks Development is partnered with Solar Renewable Energy. The folks from Solar Renewable are here. Doug Barry's here, he runs Solar Renewable Energy. Steve Krimmel is here, Dave Faust is here, Linda Barry is here. The partnership between Greenworks and Solar Renewable goes back a number of years now. I'm an engineer. I deal in nanotechnology, solar. I've been doing that for the last 12 years or so. I've done a lot of solar talks all over the area, and part of what I talk about when I do my sermons on solar around the area is that solar is not a technology business. Technology's been around since 1954, and it really hasn't changed all that much. It's gotten a lot cheaper, but fundamentally it hasn't changed all that much since '54. Solar's not a technology business, it's a tax accounting and finance business. So when you've got a tax accounting and finance business, if you're smart, you get a CPA who knows what he's doing, because I am not a CPA and I never will be, and a CPA can structure the tax and the finance and the incentives and put the whole deal together so that it makes sense for customers, whether they're not-for-profit or for-profit, and that's the kind of thing we've done here. So I want to show you really quickly a couple of the things that Solar Renewable and Greenworks have done over the last couple of years. This is a project at Masonic Village in Elizabethtown. We put up a 1 megawatt array a number of years ago. It worked so well financially that they called us back a couple of years later, wanted us to come back and put 2 more megawatts of power up. So that's about a 7-acre array that we've installed at Masonic Village, and it is performing financially phenomenally well. We just finished a couple of months ago an 11-acre floating array, which is pretty cool. This is the largest floating array in the country at this point. It's 11 acres of solar that's floating. Each panel has a pontoon that it sits on, and we floated them all out in the middle of a retention pond for a water authority in New Jersey. That's a pretty cool technology, and it makes sense in Jersey. You couldn't do that in Pennsylvania. It makes sense in New Jersey because the incentives for solar in New Jersey are strong enough that you can do that kind of a thing at higher cost. Pennsylvania's not there yet, although I think we're getting closer. We are working right now on, this is a 4.4 megawatt array. We're working on a 35 megawatt floating array next. That is in the process. That is 80 acres of floating solar. That's pretty wild, the technology. This is Commonwealth Charter Academy, about 5 minutes that way. They just bought the building, the PSCCU building at the entrance to Hack. They've got a phenomenal aquaponics center in there. If you ever have a chance to get in the building, you got to see that. We put about a 400 kW array on the roof of the building a couple of months ago that powers about 31% of the CCA space. Let's talk about the Campus Square array. So in 2008, there's the array that we put on the building. That array is a 42 kW array, 42,000 watts of solar. That's not huge, so I'm putting 12 kW on the roof of the house that Nadine and I have in Mechanicsburg in a couple of weeks. So a 12 kW system does the house and charges my electric car, basically, is where I'm going with that. So a 42 kW system is 4 times that, not huge. That 42 kW system in 2008 cost us $392,000 to put up. 2008 is when TARP money was floating around. This was heavily TARP funded. Is the only reason I did it back in 2008, because if you didn't have the incentives, it wasn't going to work. That's the array that we put up in 2008. Here's the 2019 array that we just finished. This is the 2019 piece. Here's the 2008 piece. The difference is obvious. I'm a design engineer. I really like simplicity in design, and it's pretty clear that this is a lot simpler system. It's a lot more compact system. It's a lot less expensive system than what we put up in 2008. This guy is 48 kW. Keep in mind that 42 kW is what I put on the roof 10 years ago. It cost me $392,000. This guy's 48 kW. I put it up about 2 weeks ago for $92,000. It took us months and months to put the array up on the roof in 2008 because the array, I'm jumping ahead, hang on one sec. I put the array up a couple of months, or back in 2008, it took me months to put it up there because it was so complex. It took us about a week and a half to put this 48 kW system on the roof about 2 weeks ago. It was quick, very quick. So here's the comparison between the 2008 system and the 2019 system. Basically, I put up 13% more power 2 weeks ago than I did in 2008 for 76% less money. Not 76% of the investment in 2008, 76% less than I did in 2008. That's remarkable that the cost of solar has come down that much in 10 years, and that's a big part of the reason why solar makes financial sense in Pennsylvania right now. You compare that cost reduction over 10 years to the incentives federally, which are starting to sunset now, I'll talk about that in a second, to the federal incentives and the new and newly energized, no pun intended, state incentives. That's why solar makes financial sense in Pennsylvania at this point. Reduced cost is a big part of the deal. Here's a kind of a close-up. Here's the 2019 stuff that we just put on the roof. Here's the 2008 stuff that's sitting there on I-beams on the roof. I mean, it's about as over-engineered as I could possibly have designed the system. You don't need I-beams under a solar array. This is when I wasn't as involved in commercial solar as I am now. So they put the system up. It cost us almost $400,000, and it was solar, and it was good as far as I was concerned. They've got I-beams under the thing. They've got panels that are 270 watts per panel. This guy is sitting on these little plastic molded trays. They're weighted down with just cast concrete blocks, about as simple as you can get. There's a bracket in each corner of the panel that holds the panel onto those molded trays. These things are 385 watt panels versus the 270 watt panels that we did 10 years ago. These things, the 270 watt 10-year-old panels are what's called monofacial panels. They collect from the top of the panel. That's where the sun hits them. They have an opaque surface underneath. That's the way the technology worked back then. About a year ago, the industry went to what's called a bifacial panel that collects from the top and the bottom side of the panel, and that's the demo panel that we've got out in the entryway that you can take a look at when you're finished here. I'll make sure that one of the guys from SRE is there to explain it to you. But basically, these guys are not only 385 watts per panel versus 270 10 years ago, but they're collecting from the top and the bottom of the panel instead of just from the one surface. There's about 30% more energy generation that they're able to do because they collect from top and bottom. So on a white roof like we've got on the Campus Square building, that's even better because I'm reflecting a lot of sunlight off of a white roof, so they're collecting even more as bifacial panels. But even in a ground mount array, which is most of what Greenworks and SRE are doing right now, on a ground mount array where you've got the ground down there, there's still enough ambient light bouncing around that it makes sense to do a bifacial panel. They've gotten the cost of the things down enough that they're going to pick up more energy and generate more, and it just makes sense to do that. Here's the financial structure of the Campus Square project. So this was a $92,000 project to put 48 kW up on the roof. Cost us $92,000 to do that. Remember, 10 years ago, it cost me $392,000 to do less energy than this. At $92,000 worth of cost for the system, we're doing a 25% leveraged investment. So I'm borrowing 75% of that, putting 25% of that money into the system. So that's a $23,000 investment that we made. As a for-profit business, Greenworks is a for-profit business, I'm going to get about 122% of that $23,000 back in year one. That's pretty cool. And I'm going to, after year one then, when I get 122% of my money back, I'm going to get about an average of 7.6% return on that money for the next 39 years. I don't trust the stock. Better than T-bills. Better than the stock market. I'm waiting for the stock market to crash. I don't see this. Well, this system's sitting up there now and it's generating, so it's going to cash flow. It's going to produce, and I'm going to see 7.6% returns on that guy. This all counts on the fact that there's such a thing in the world as solar renewable energy certificates. So you get a green certificate for every megawatt hour of solar that you produce. So when this system turns on in a couple of weeks, I'll be saving the electricity that this system's producing. I won't be buying that electricity from the grid, but at the same time that I'm saving the electricity because I'm generating it myself, I've got a power plant on the roof now is basically the bottom line. At the same time that I'm saving electricity, I'm going to generate green certificates, which are essentially stock certificates. So every month, Linda Berry sends me an email, because I always forget, and reminds me that she needs the generation data from the roof array, and those generation data are going to go up now that I've got another 48 kW on the roof. I've now got 90 kW on the roof. I send her the generation data. SRE takes care of doing all of the renewable energy certification stuff, and we sell those certificates on a Pennsylvania controlled market, a supply and demand market. So utilities in Pennsylvania are required to produce a certain percentage of their energy through solar. And they can either do that themselves, which they tend not to do, or they can buy these green certificates from people who do. We got the borders, I don't want to get into all kinds of detail, but we got the borders closed to out-of-state generation about 2 years ago. Up until 2 years ago, about 70% of Pennsylvania's solar generation for this market was produced out of state. 70% of it came in from North Carolina, from utility scale, Duke Energy basically, from utility scale arrays in North Carolina, that depressed Pennsylvania's market. It's a supply and demand market. You flood the market, which is what the utilities did through legislation, and you wind up with a market for those certificates that's really depressed. When you close the borders to out-of-state generation, which we did 2 years ago, now all of a sudden 70% of the generation from out-of-state doesn't come in, can't come in because the borders are closed. Supply and demand market, 70% of the supply just went away. That takes the value up. So now, instead of $5 per certificate, those certificates are $45. That my stock just went up 9 times, right? There's legislation in play that I'd love to have you support, Senator DeSanto, that is looking to increase Pennsylvania's requirement for solar generation by about 10x. Right now, New Jersey, New York, and Maryland are all targeting 50% renewables by 2030. Pennsylvania's target is still 8% by 2030 versus 50% by 2030, Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland. There is legislation in Pennsylvania in play right now, SB 600, that looks to increase that requirement by 10x. That's looking favorable. We're following that closely, and that's looking favorable. So in a controlled supply and demand market for these certificates, we just took 70% of the supply out because we closed the borders. Now we're looking to increase the demand for those certificates by 10x to even close to keep track or keep pace with neighboring states. So you've got a market that's controlled, 10x the demand, 70% less supply. We think those certificates are going to go to $100 to $150 per certificate. No guarantees on that, but that's where it's looking like the market's going. You can make more money on a solar array then in those certificates than you can on saving the electricity in the first place. $100 certificate's worth the equivalent of 10 cents a kilowatt hour. I'm offsetting 6.5, 7 cents a kilowatt hour's worth of electricity costs coming in from the grid in this building. So I'm going to save 6.5, 7 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity cost in this building, while I'm going to, in the not too distant future, have another 10 cents per kilowatt hour's worth of value coming into the array. That 7.6% return for this system doesn't include inflation of those certificates. So cash flow wise, that absolutely is a financial play in Pennsylvania right now. Now, this counts on the fact that I put this up in 2019, and there's a 30% federal tax incentive for solar that's in place through the end of calendar year 2019. And SRE and I are working hard with a number of school districts and other customers right now to get them started this year. Because if you get the project started this year, you get the full 30%. If you don't get it started this year, you leak into next year, it goes down to 26, then 22% the year after that, then down to 10, unless the federal government decides to reinstate that 30%, which they may. But these numbers count on 30% federal tax incentive and then those state SRECs to make up what you're seeing in front of you. But when you include the lower cost of solar, plus the federal incentive, plus the state incentives, all of which are lined up right now, it is right now that Pennsylvania makes sense for doing solar. Next year's a great year as well. 22% is not a bad number for the federal incentive. It's in the next couple of years that you want to launch, assuming that the federal government's going to let those incentives continue to deteriorate over the next couple of years, which they may or may not, but no time like the present. That's the story on this roof. I wanted to take a real quick look at a 1 meg. So this is a 48 kW system, 48,000 watts. I want to take a really quick look at what it looks like for a 1 megawatt array. 1 megawatt array is 1 million watts, and this is a kind of a typical size that we're doing 1 million to 3 million watts of power right now for school districts and colleges and other entities, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit. So for a 1 megawatt array, the numbers change a little bit. A 1 megawatt array is going to cost about $1.8 million. That's right there. If this is a for-profit entity, like Greenworks is a for-profit entity, to do that same 25% leveraged investment that I did here, you'd put about you'd put $450,000 in of your own money, and then you'd borrow the balance over a 20-year period. If you do that, you're going to get your money back 100% plus in year one, same deal as I did here, and there's different structures here, which is why our returns year one were a little bit better here than they are in this case, but you're going to get 100% plus your money back year one. After that 100% plus return year one, in this case, you're going to get about 12% of your money back year on year for 39 years. That's not a bad deal. God bless America, right? That's what it looks like for a 1 megawatt system for a for-profit. If you do that for a not-for-profit system, let's do the same 1 megawatt array analysis. So a not-for-profit would be a school, a university, a municipality, a hospital, things like that. Just pick a couple random scans. If you do a 1 megawatt array, and this is an intentional not an intentional setup. If you do a 1 megawatt array for a not-for-profit entity versus a for-profit, now I'm in a situation in which the not-for-profit entities don't have federal tax liability. We set up special purpose entities. We set up a special purpose entity that's a structure, partnership structure, that's comprised of investors who do have federal tax liability, who can take advantage of that 30% federal tax credit. We set that up so that they do the system. There's no cost to the not-for-profit entity up front at all. They set up the system. Those investors set up the system. They pay for it. They get it installed. They operate and maintain it for the first 5 years. The not-for-profit entity, after 5 years, those investors have to hold for a 5-year period to qualify for the 30% in the first place. Once those investors qualify for that 30%, we encourage the not-for-profit entity to buy the system out because the cash flow is better after 5 years. Or the cash flow is better if they buy the system out than if they just continue to lease the system for a 25-year period, which they could, but they don't want to because the cash flow is better to buy it out. So in a case like this one, that same 1 megawatt array, which is about 2.5 acres worth of a solar field, it's not a lot. It's a relatively big residential lot's worth of solar. If they put no money down in the system to do a 1 megawatt array, that's $1.8 million worth of a system. Their cash flow, without spending any money up front, their cash flow every year for the first 5 years is going to be about $40,000 a year. And that's $40,000 worth of money falling out of the sky. For a school district, this is a layout on the lower left of the slide. This is a layout of the 2 solar arrays that we're going to do for the Weatherly School District, about an hour and a half northeast of here. I'm actually going to be up there tonight talking to their school board about this. This one happened to be almost exactly a 1 megawatt array. So the Weatherly School District, which is one of the hundreds of financially strapped school districts in Pennsylvania that doesn't have the investment money to put in on a solar system or anything else, they're not going to have to spend money up front. System's going to turn on in a couple of months. They're going to start saving about $40,000 a year at $45 per credit SRECs. Those could double. They're going to save another $50,000 or $60,000 a year if those things double, which is huge. Now they'd be up to $100,000 a year's worth of savings. After they buy the system out, and they can 100% finance the system after 5 years because there's equity in the system, and the United States Department of Agriculture actually has a loan program in place specifically to do solar loans for municipalities or not-for-profit entities. They tend to specialize in education, but they do municipalities and hospitals and the whole 9 yards as well. You can do a 100% financed system after year 5. So they're going to save $40,000 a year at current SREC values for 5 years. They can 100% finance the system after year 5. So again, they're not putting any money out of pocket, which they don't have anyway, so that's good. After they buy the system out and 100% finance it, including finance costs, they're going to save about $80,000 a year at current SREC values. So for a 40-year cash flow, these systems last about 40 years, 40 to 50 years. That school district's going to save about $3.8 million. That's not a terrible thing at all. So financially in Pennsylvania right now, for not-for-profit entities and for-profit entities, there really is no reason not to renewably power yourself. Now keep in mind that once a school district or once any entity, for-profit or not-for-profit, puts up their own generating system, if energy costs double or triple in Pennsylvania over the next 5 or 10 years, which they might, the argument I always get is that, well, energy costs for the last 5 years have stayed flat. That's true. That's because of fracked gas. It's real low cost. If you figure out how to liquefy that fracked gas and ship that over to Europe, where the value is about 5 times as much, costs of gas are going to go up like crazy in Pennsylvania, and the cost of electricity is going to follow because our low-cost electricity is because of low-cost gas. Low-cost gas has a short fuse on it in my mind. We're going to liquefy it and ship it, and it's not going to be used here as much. That could double or triple electricity costs in Pennsylvania in a hurry. If you've got your own generating system, which the Weatherly School District is shortly going to have, that's going to be an interesting news article for them that electricity costs have doubled or tripled, but it's not going to affect their bottom line at all because they're going to have their own generating system, which is, that's a reason to do it on its own. If it didn't financially cash flow, just having your own generating system where you're insulated from energy inflation is a reason to do the flipping thing. that's the story. Let me show you one other thing. This is, if I can figure out where I'm going. Shane, where, Matt.
Click on
Right here.
Yeah.
Let's do a short video. Bub Manning did the drone video for us. This is a short video on the construction of the array. A very short video on the construction of the array. Let me, at this point, turn you over to Phil Garnishelli with UPMC Pinnacle to tell you his perspective on the whole thing. Phil.
Thank you, Doug. So I'm here today to talk about nanotechnology, and I'm going to.
This is your nanotechnology specialist right here.
I'm going to answer any questions that you may have on it, but no, from our perspective, it's an exciting time in Midtown, and you know, Pinnacle is so happy to be part of the city's revitalization, and as a tenant in this building. You can imagine, as if you're real estate people or business owners, what this all does for our rent. So, you know, if you look at it from the perspective, if you're just talking financially, it lowers our per square foot expenses significantly. So just from that perspective alone, it's good. It's really great to revitalize Midtown. Our local headquarters are here. I believe we moved about 48 people here. It's allowed us to be part of the Midtown growth, which is great. The renewable energy offering systems are good health for the community as well. You know, Doug talked a lot about the financials of it. None of us have talked about what it does for the environment and so forth. It's great. You know, so the floating platoons, I'm looking forward to that also as well. So supporting cleaner and renewable energy is good for our area residents, it's good for the city, and it's good for UPMC Pinnacle. So we're excited to be here. We're looking into the future of other things we can do here as a system, and excited to do that, working with the mayor's office on renewing and revitalizing Midtown. So thank you all for coming, and I believe the mayor's up next to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Thank you for being here. Thanks to all of you. I want to welcome you to what is one of the hottest areas in the whole city. Between what's happening and all the energy in this building, the courthouse, which is the girders of which are redefining our skyline, the Plan 320 Riley project. There's even a zoning map amendment currently before City Council that would change the zoning for the old S&A Homes lots just adjacent to here to make it easier for denser mixed-use commercial and residential development. All of these activities are basically about making a sustainable tax base for Harrisburg's future, and it's a really exciting time, and it's fantastic to be at the cutting edge of technology and investment at the same time. I wanted to just briefly talk about sustainability from a sort of past, present, and future viewpoint for the city of Harrisburg. I'll be quick, but looking back historically, two of the things that I am most proud of that have occurred over the past 6 years that I've been mayor are recycling improvements as well as our LED light conversion. And let me talk about each of those just briefly in financial terms, and I'll echo the theme which Doug has had, which is that these types of sustainable projects can make financial sense, and when they make financial sense, we've got to seize those opportunities. So from a recycling standpoint, we've managed to triple recycling in the city of Harrisburg over those 6 years. And we're now recycling over 3,000 tons of product on a annual basis. That number is saving us when you think about it. It costs about $200 a ton to dispose of trash at the incinerator. By taking it out of the trash stream and into recycling, it's a major savings. You see that savings over the course of multiple years, and suddenly you're paying for new trash trucks, new employees. You're creating an environment where people who hadn't gotten raises before can have cost of living adjustments and other things moving forward, and you're on the path to a sustainable city. And then there's the benefit to the environment. We've done it through interesting technology like our Recycle Coach and educational outreach to the populace, but it's been a complete transformation in how Harrisburg residents approach recycling. From an LED standpoint, one of the first projects we did when I took office was to convert all of the streetlights in Harrisburg to LED. On an annual basis, that has resulted in a reduction of over 3,000 tons of carbon emissions, but it's also resulted in a savings of over $500,000 a year just in the electricity costs of those lights. That project paid for itself already. It was about a 7-year projection. We're heading towards year 7. I want to thank M&T Bank for stepping up. They stepped up and financed that project for the city, but they did it in a sort of no-risk way for them. It was guaranteed. We could pay back the initial $3.5 million cost just with the energy savings alone in 7 years. And moving forward, that's going to be a savings that's going to help us keep a balanced and sustainable budget for Harrisburg. In terms of the present, there's some really exciting things going on in Harrisburg right now from a sustainability standpoint. I want to single out Rafika Muhammad, who's in the middle there, and she is on our Environmental Advisory Council that has been reinvigorated in the city. And one of the things which they're doing, they're working on a number of projects from the reinvigorating the Harrisburg greenhouse, but importantly, they oversee a summer jobs program for our youth in Harrisburg called the Environmental Teen Corps that basically spends its summers not only engaged in environmental cleanups and activities, but also learning about these issues, understanding them, and helping prepare them for potential careers and life choices that include sustainability as a sort of foundational part. That program is very active and it's growing. We'd like to see it expand to even more kids, and I will put out a plug, which is that we're always looking for sponsors to help us make that program have even more of an impact. Again, we're up to 150 kids now. We started with just a couple dozen, and it's a partnership with the Harrisburg Housing Authority, so it's really reaching some of the people that need those opportunities the most in Harrisburg. Also, from a present standpoint, and this is very exciting, the city is engaged in a plan to bring public electric vehicle charging stations to Harrisburg now for the first time. This is part of the 3rd Street paving project. It'll be the final phase, and it will take place in the spring, and we have 8 charging stations planned for the area right in front of the State Museum. It's a partnership with the state legislature, many of whom drive electric vehicles but had no place to charge them currently in the city. They literally had to charge them in remote stations and then take Ubers into the Capitol. But that will no longer be the case. That is a sort of public-private partnership, but we're also, from the city standpoint, we are looking to put, and this is in the budget presentation I'll be giving in just another week or so, put new electric vehicle charging stations for our own city fleet in our garage that we have on City Island. We currently have a leasing program for the city fleet. They rotate in and out on a somewhat regular basis, so it's relatively easy for us to switch over to electric vehicles as they cycle through the leasing program. We're going to have the new charging stations in place, and that's sort of the final thing that we've needed to be able to bring our fleet into electric vehicles, and we're very excited. And then as we look forward to the future, I wanted to end with solar and say that Doug has been very helpful. He has met with us and explained the benefits of solar, much as we heard today. We want to do solar in the city. We know it makes sense. We've engaged in a sort of long search for where exactly would be the right location. We've looked in parks. We've looked in the floodplain. We even tried to work with Norfolk Southern to see if there were some possibilities along the rail lines in Harrisburg. But we found a partner, and that partner is Laxwama. And the idea of putting a solar array on top of the ash piles at the incinerator, turning what is essentially a negative acreage into something incredibly positive is something that we think is going to work. So we're partnering with them. They would take the lead in actually building and designing the array. The city would purchase its electricity from them, sort of guaranteeing and allowing that process to make sense. And we would have a sustainable energy source right here in the city that could power all of the city's electric needs. So that's for the future. All of these initiatives are exciting. It is really at the core of everything we believe in Harrisburg. And I just wanted to share some of those stories with you this morning. So thank you, Doug. Thank you, Phil. And thank you all for being here.
I want to say one final thing to wrap up. One final thought. We live in a really fascinating period of time in my mind, a period of time in which, especially as an engineer, which I am, we've got the tools to fix our issues as far as energy is concerned. But while we're driving off the edge of a cliff for not doing these kinds of things, we've got the capability. The technologies are out there. It really is a political struggle at this point to put the right incentives, the right pieces in place for renewables to move those technologies forward. We've incentivized fossil fuels, honestly, so much that it is really, really difficult to compete with heavily subsidized fossil fuels as a renewable competitor. With reasonable, about 1/7 of the subsidies that are out there for fossil fuels are what's being put into renewables right now. So that's pushback that I get fairly frequently. Why would I put my tax dollars into what you're doing? Well, you're putting tons of tax dollars into fossil fuel energy. If you put a fraction of those tax dollars into renewables, we can fix this. And we've got the technology to do it right now, and we've got the wherewithal to do it right now. It's the political will that's the issue, and that's where the whole society's trying to figure things out at this point. It was great to see you today. We'll be here to answer questions. We'll have some people out there to talk about the solar panel itself. There's information about Penn Futures event that's out on the refreshment stand for next week's event. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jim. That was great. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Phil, thank you. This is great.